Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Some fascinating news coming out for this Nebraska program Wednesday afternoon. As it sounds like Matt Rhule, the Nebraska Cornhuskers, not done quite yet in the transfer portal, as former USC cornerback Ceyair Wright scheduled to take an official visit to Lincoln over the weekend. And I think this is massive news for Nebraska for a couple of different reasons. One being Ceyair Wright is a very exciting player in terms of what he can be at the collegiate level. You take a look at Ceyair Wright and some of the background that we'll get into in a little bit. And this was a former top 100 national prospect that played a decent amount of football for USC over the last 2 years. But I think more importantly, you look at this Nebraska cornerback room, a cornerback room that we are all very excited about. Guys like Tommy Hill, Malcolm Hartzog, you're excited about what you have. But I think there's now some question marks about the depth in the cornerback room with Bly Hill going down with the injury, with Ethan Nation right now not with this Nebraska program. I think the cornerback 3, cornerback 4, cornerback 5, some of those depth positions in that cornerback room are probably some question marks for this Nebraska program. And what better guy to come in and add some depth to this Nebraska cornerback room than a guy like Ceyair Wright, who, clearly has all conference potential as a collegiate football player, but I think more importantly has been a guy that's played at the Power 5 level for USC over the last couple of years. Want to get into what this Nebraska cornerback room looks like, what Ceyair Wright might bring to this Nebraska defense before we get into it. And as always, just want to say thank you to you guys and to the Nebraska fans. Y'all know I love talking this program. The amount of support y'all continue to show as we talk the recruiting trail over the last couple of weeks, it's been absolutely amazing. Can't thank you guys enough. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And if we do, in fact, get a commitment coming out of the weekend, we'll dive into Ceyair Wright, talk about what he brings to this Nebraska defense. And without further ado, let's get into Ceyair Wright, and let's start with the football player Ceyair Wright, a guy that I remember coming out of high school in the 2021 class. This is, and we talk about this a lot, Matt Rhule values certain kind of guys when he's building his roster. You would file Ceyair Wright under one of Matt Rhule's guys. This is a guy that has extremely long arms, a solid frame at 6 foot, 180 pounds. Then you look at the athletic profile and say 10.8 in the 100-meter dash coming out of high school. This kid's a box checker in terms of the physical traits you are looking for at the cornerback position. And we all know Matt Rhule really does value traits. Hey, give me the premier athletes. We'll teach them to be good football players. That's a motto that we've been saying with Matt Rhule in Nebraska for the last couple of months on the recruiting trail. And as Matt Rhule has built this roster in Ceyair Wright, kind of follows that mold. This is a guy that, from a physical trait standpoint, is checking off a lot of boxes. He just kind of needs to put it on the field on a more consistent basis. And can you necessarily blame a guy like Ceyair Wright for not necessarily putting it together? You look at that USC defense the last 2 years under Coach Alex Grinch, and you just say nobody was really achieving their potential within that USC program on the defensive side of the football. A change of scenery for an elite player like Ceyair Wright can be, I think, could massively help this kid out. And I think you could get a really good version of Ceyair Wright heading into 2024. And I think another interesting conversation to have is he's a guy with 2 years of eligibility remaining. So he can come in and provide you some depth year one with Nebraska in 2024, but potentially, again, I think we're talking about a potential all-conference caliber cornerback in Ceyair Wright, giving the physical traits that this kid brings to the table. And you take a look at the Nebraska cornerback room, and partially why I think this is such big news. You look at Nebraska secondary, specifically in the cornerback spot. We don't have many question marks about Tommy Hill, Malcolm Hartzog, two guys that we've seen play really good football for Nebraska. A guy in Tommy Hill that I think is going to break out going into 2024. I think we are looking at a truly all-conference caliber guy in Tommy Hill. You could say the same thing for Malcolm Hartzog. Now, you look at what's behind some of those names, there are some question marks, right? Bly Hill goes down with the injury. We're not exactly sure what the timetable looks like for someone in Bly Hill who, again, this is his first year with the program. So he's missing all of fall camp. You're not sure how much you can rely on Bly Hill, even when he gets back from the injury. And then you look at Ethan Nation, a guy that we were all excited about after his freshman year, not with this Nebraska program as it stands right now. You're suddenly saying, hey, this cornerback room is not as deep as we thought it was going back 4 months ago. And I think Matt Rhule has been very clear that he values depth within this program. I mean, he's used the recruiting trail, he's used the transfer portal. And one of the things that we've talked about with Nebraska, why we're so high on this program, is you look top to bottom and say, this is a really, really deep roster. One of the positions that became not so deep over the last couple of months was that cornerback spot. Matt Rhule getting proactive in the transfer portal and potentially trying to address that cornerback spot. Now, you have some other guys like Jeremiah Charles going into his second year. You talk about traitsy cornerbacks. Jeremiah Charles is at the top of the list, a true freshman in Mario Buford. I think Matt Rhule just looks at it and says, hey, we wouldn't mind having some more experience in that cornerback room as well. And you get the opportunity to add a guy in Ceyair Wright who not only has that experience, has played over 849 career snaps for USC. So he has some of that experience, but he also gives you that high upside cornerback play as well. Very interesting conversation to get into. Again, if Ceyair Wright does in fact commit to this Nebraska program, we'll dive into the film, talk about what he brings to this Nebraska defense. Appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. Again, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We'll talk to y'all later.